Hello and welcome everybody from Ho Chi Minh City, from Vietnam. This time I will tell you the history of the Vietnam War. Why from here? The Vietnam War ended in Saigon. Back that time Ho Chi Minh City was called Saigon, on 13th April of 1975. The war was a very bloody and very long conflict. Actually it took 19 years, 5 months, 4 weeks and 1 day, because it started on the 1st November of 1955. It was fought between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. More concretely, they had the official name. North Vietnam was the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and South Vietnam was the Republic of Vietnam. Well, North Vietnam was supported by the Soviet Union and by China, and South Vietnam was supported by the United States of America. The conflict also spilled over to neighboring countries and increased the Laotian and the Cambodian civil wars. All the wars ended in 1975 by all the three states became communist states. And well, in order to understand the Vietnam War, we need to start in the beginnings with the first conflict, the first Indochina War. Indochina was a French colony since the 19th century, and Indochina also contained the current territories of Vietnam. So in 1945 the Japanese army invaded the current Vietnam, and they took control here. But Viet Minh, a communist revolutionary party group, tried to resist and try to gain independence. And well, at that time the US government and also Soviet Union and China supported the communist Vietnamese. It is a very fun fact currently, in considering that later they were fighting against the communist Vietnamese. So yeah, US supported them because in the Second World War US were against Japan, as we know. So what happened on the 2nd September of 1945? The leader of Viet Minh, Ho Chi Minh, proclaimed independence for Vietnam, and he said that the Democratic Republic of Vietnam was established. But on the 23rd September of the same year, 1945, the French overthrew the government, and they said that colonial powers are restored, and now the French are again in control. Of course, the communists were not happy with this, and they started a revolution. So the conflict had escalations, and this is how the first Indochina War started between the French and the Vietnamese revolutionaries. In the 1950s, the conflict between the French and the communist Vietnamese was merged with the Cold War. The Cold War was between Soviet Union and the United States. So what was the initiator of this? Soviet Union and China recognized the Viet Minh's Democratic Republic of Vietnam government seated in Hanoi as the legitimate government of whole Vietnam. So some months later, Great Britain and the United States recognized the French-backed state of Vietnam, based in Saigon and led by the former emperor Bao Dai, as the legitimate government of the whole Vietnam. So that was a big conflict already, and in June 1950 the Korean War started, and the United States was convinced, well, the politicians were convinced that this is a very strong example of communist expansionism of the Soviet Union. They were thinking that the Soviet Union want to enlarge their power in many other countries in Indochina and maybe also in other places in Asia. China started to send military advisors and trainers to North Vietnam, started with July of 1950, and they transformed Viet Minh from a guerrilla troop to a normal military army. And well, as a response, the United States also gave aid to the French people, to the South Army. And well, it was $1 billion which they invested in this first Indochina war. This was 80% of the total war costs of the French people, so you can imagine that actually it was a conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union and China, and well, the French people didn't really pay much for this conflict, only 20% for the war, but the president of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was not thinking about sending military troops to Vietnam, not yet. On the 7th May of 1954, the French garrison at Dien Bien Phu surrounded and the First Indochina War was over. At the Geneva conference, ceasefire was negotiated, and finally Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam were independent. They were freed from the French colonial powers. At the same conference it was decided that Vietnam must be temporarily splitted in two at the 17th parallel in South and North Vietnam. Well, they also decided that elections must be held about unification. Ho Chi Minh wanted to start actually to continue the war in the south, but the Chinese allies told him to not do it because they can win this unification by elections. In the meanwhile, Americans started psychological warfare campaign led by Edward Lansdale, designed by him. He was a guy of the CIA. They spread fake news in the North Vietnam about dropping an atomic bomb in Hanoi, but also about the anti-Catholic feelings of Viet Minh, the communist party. So the North Vietnamese Catholics feared persecution from the communists, so 1 million people fled from north to the south because of these fake news. The south, in the meanwhile, constituted the state of Vietnam with Bao Dai as emperor and the newly appointed Ngo Dinh Diem as prime minister. Neither of them signed anything at the Geneva conference. Elections were held separately in south and in the north, and Diem won in the south by 98% and proclaimed him as a minister of the new independent state Republic of Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh won 99% in the north. So yeah, these elections didn't mean actually anything, and the conflict was just escalated. Back that time John F. Kennedy was a senator, and in his speech he said that the red tide of communism which overflow Vietnam will mean a security threatening for Japan, Philippines, Myanmar, which was called Burma back that time, India and Cambodia and Laos also. So yeah, he listed most of the Asian countries, and he was thinking that it will be a security problem if Vietnam will be absolutely under communist regime, and that the Soviet Union will have much more control over these listed countries. Beginning of the summer of 1955, the Diem regime started to denounce the communist campaign, in which anti-government and communist elements were arrested, taken to concentration camps and tortured there, or also killed. And in August of 1956 he also introduced the death penalty, in which people who deemed to be a communist were just executed. The last French soldiers left South Vietnam in April of 1956, and about the same time the Chinese soldiers left North Vietnam. In May of 1956, South's dictator Diem went for a 10 days visit to the United States, and Eisenhower welcomed him with a parade in New York City, and he also said that he will support South Vietnam. The North Vietnamese also had headquarters in the south, and in the September of 1960 they ordered a full-scale uprising, full-scale revolution against the South Vietnamese government, and that time the Viet Cong was established. Viet Cong was part of the People's Army of Vietnam, and they took orders directly from Hanoi, from the North Vietnamese, and they were guerrilla troops. Usually their names were kept as a secret. I already mentioned the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the vlog about Laos, so yeah, this was a trail through the jungle, which was very important in order to supply with manpower and with weapons and with food for the Viet Cong. So it was a very long trail from North Vietnam to South Vietnam, and this couldn't be accomplished without a big success at Chepon. This was a demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam in Laos, and they conquered this territory already in May of 1958. So Ho Chi Minh called for a total revolution. Unfortunately, I must finish this vlog on the way back home because I got sick. I got a sunstroke in Ho Chi Minh City. It was very hot, and usually I can deal with that. I even like hot weather, and I never had a problem. I traveled to many countries in Southeast Asia because it was very warm, but this time somehow I was staying maybe too much in the sun doing these vlogs. Also a vlog about the War Remnants Museum. So yes, maybe that was the reason I couldn't survive the heat, and at 5 p.m. I was already feeling bad, and I stopped doing the vlog, and I returned back to my hotel room, and there I got a fever. But next day I was feeling good already, but on that day I was already leaving Ho Chi Minh City. I went to Hanoi, so the next vlogs will cover the capital of Vietnam, Hanoi. But yeah, so this is the reason that I couldn't finish the vlog in Ho Chi Minh City. But yes, let's continue, even though we don't have the background of the War Remnants Museum. In the April of 1960, North Vietnam imposed universal military conscription for adult males, and between 1961 and 63, 40,000 North Vietnamese soldiers infiltrated to the south. In 1960, Senator John F. Kennedy was elected as the new president of the United States, and he approved the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, which ended in failure. He was also facing several Cold War issues, so because of that he was hesitating to send military troops to Vietnam. His policy was that the Diem regime should face alone the guerrillas, the North Vietnamese conflict, but well, the South Vietnamese army was suffering from corruption, and the discipline was also very poor, so Kennedy started to send even more military personnel in order to train them and to consult, to help as advisors in South Vietnam. But this was not enough. The Viet Congs had many successful campaigns in South Vietnam. So the advisors of Kennedy told to the president to send military troops, but he still refused this, and until the death of Kennedy there were actually 16,000 military personnel in Vietnam, but not troops. They were all like trainers and advisors. The US and the Vietnamese joint venture had many strange ideas. The strategic Hamlet program was one of them. They wanted to relocate peasants and poor people from villages in order to isolate them from the Viet Cong soldiers, and their idea was to protect them, but actually they didn't need any protection, and they wanted a closer tie with the South Vietnamese government. And well, what happened? These peasants were relocated to fortified villages, and these were defended by South Vietnamese soldiers. Of course, people were very unhappy about the Diem regime to force people to leave their homes. Approximately 4.3 million people were relocated, between 1961 and 1963. They also got big promises. The South Vietnamese government were promising big compensations, but they never got these monies. So actually this operation ended after Diem's death, and the peasants moved back to their home villages, and the fortified villages were destroyed, at least most of them. Discontent with Diem's policies exploded in the May of 1963 after the Hue Pat Dan shootings of 9 unarmed Buddhists who were protesting against the ban to display the Buddhist flag in the birthday of the Buddha. Actually, Diem was giving privileges to the Catholic Church and its adherents instead to the Buddhist majority. So the Buddhist people were protesting, and they were really unhappy against Diem. And there were also some paramilitary units who were destroying pagodas during Diem's reigning. So yes, the US officials were already thinking about replacing Diem. So the Americans started to support a military group which wanted to do a coup d'etat. They wanted to overthrow the Diem regime, and they were successful in that. This new military group took the leadership of South Vietnam, and Diem was executed together with his brother on the 2nd November of 1963. And absolutely crazy, the American leaders invited the leaders of this military group to the embassy, to the US embassy, and they congratulated to these. Absolutely incredible. But the Americans didn't realize that actually they cause instability in the region, because after that several coup d'etats were performed, in the meaning that the government was changed many times, and each military group tried to gain advantage and to take control of South Vietnam. So the whole situation was very unstable. What happened? The North Vietnamese guerrillas took advantage of this, of course, and they win many battles in that time. They could surprise the South Vietnamese forces. President Kennedy was assassinated on the 22nd November of 1963, and his successor, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, said that the battle against communism must be joined with strength and determination. On the 2nd August of 1964, USS Maddox, on a secret intelligence mission along North Vietnam's coast, allegedly fired upon and damaged several torpedo boats that had been stalking it in the Gulf of Tonkin, and the second attack was reported by the same ship and also by USS Turner Joy 2 days later. So yes, these circumstances of the attacks were murky, were not really known, and in opinion of the historians, they were already seeking cause to attack North Vietnam, and that happened later. After the second attack, the US Congress approved the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which granted the power for the president to take all necessary measures to repeal any aggression against the forces of United States, and also to counterattack, of course. And on the 7th February of 1965, there was an attack of the US base at Pleiku, and after that the US forces started an airstrike of North Vietnam, and bombing was not concentrating only on the territories of North Vietnam, but also on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Following the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, Hanoi anticipated the arrival of US troops in South Vietnam, and they were expanding the Viet Cong forces. You can imagine that in 1959 the Viet Congs had 5,000 soldiers, and by 1964 there were already 100,000, and the complete North Vietnamese army was about 1 million soldiers, so absolute extraordinary. And in that year they also standardized the equipment of the soldiers with AK-47 rifles and other supplies, so the forces, the Vietnamese forces, were growing very fast. Finally, the American ground war started against the North Vietnamese on the 8th March of 1965, and 3,500 American Marine soldiers arrived to Da Nang, South Vietnam, and this was the beginning of the ground war. And by the end of December of this year, the troops were much more numerous. They were already 200,000 soldiers. So William Westmoreland, general, said that it is important to increase the number of the American soldiers here, and they are much more better than the North Vietnamese soldiers because of their determination, mobility, and increased technology, and more manpower will solve the situation. But this was of course not correct, because he didn't calculate that this is a way ground for the American soldiers, absolutely unknown territories in the jungle, and the North Vietnamese know also very interesting strategies and tricks. For example, they use the Ho Chi tunnels in order to get behind the enemy lines. I will tell you more about these tunnels. And one more thing which I wanted to say, that that time the American citizens, the public, and also the press were behind the president. They said it is correct to fight against communism, and they were supporting this military movement. Washington encouraged its Southeast Asia Treaty Organization allies to contribute troops. New Zealand, Australia, Philippines, and Thailand all sent troops to the Vietnam War. However, big NATO allies like Canada and the United Kingdom refused Washington's request. The first major battle occurred in the November of 1965 at La Drang. The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong insurgents remained elusive and showed great tactical flexibility, so the Americans couldn't win this battle. After that, the US and its allies mounted complex search and destroy operations designed to find enemy forces, destroy them, and then quickly withdraw with war helicopters, but it was very hard to find enemy spots in the jungle. The war was characterized by smaller unit contacts or engagements, and the North Vietnamese and the Viet Congs were strategically very good positioned, so 90% of the firefights were initiated by them, not by the Americans, and of these 80% were very well planned, so they could surprise the Americans. So despite the overwhelming American numbers, they had many American troops there, still the Viet Congs were in lead, they were winning many battles. In the meanwhile, political situation in South Vietnam began to stabilize with coming to the power of Prime Minister Air Marshal Nguyen Chao Ki and figurehead of the state, General Nguyen Van Thieu, a head of a military junta in the middle of the 1965. So this ended a series of coups d'état which happened at least one time in a year, but moreover at least 2 times in a year. And in 1967 they also held proper elections Of course, this is just ironical calling it proper, because of course it was organized, and Nguyen Van Thieu became the president of South Vietnam in 1967. So now again a new leader of South Vietnam could stabilize the country. The Johnson administration employed the policy of minimum candor in its communication with the media. The military information officers were talking about big progresses with the Vietnam War, but the media's coverage and also some statements from the Pentagon had another opinions. There were other different statements, and this developed a credibility gap, and the public trust was damaged. So people realized that the Vietnam War is actually not progressing as planned. The Tet offensive began on the 13th January of 1968, as more than 100 cities were attacked by 85,000 Viet Cong and Vietnamese soldiers, including assaults on key military bases, headquarters, government buildings, and also the US embassy in Saigon was attacked. So initially US and South Vietnamese forces were shocked about the scale of this attack, and how good it was planned, and how the North Vietnamese could know about the location of these military bases. North Vietnamese troops won most of the battles, and they could recapture most of the cities, except the former imperial capital Hue. In the Battle of Hue, American forces employed massive firepower, destroying 80% of the city. 80% of the city was left in ruins. On the 10th May of 1968, peace talks began between the United States of America and North Vietnam in Paris, but meetings and negotiations stagnated for 5 months until Johnson ordered to halt the bombing of North Vietnam. At the same time, Hanoi realized that they couldn't achieve a total victory, so they employed the strategy of fighting while talking and talking while fighting. So actually military movements could occur anytime during the peace negotiations and meetings in Paris. Johnson declined to run for re-election, as his approval rate slumped from 48% to 36%, so he had no chances to win the election. Actually, the Vietnam War destroyed his presidency. Many politicians and historians were saying that 30,000 American lives were the cost of his aggressive approach of the North Vietnamese situation. So 30,000 Americans passed away until that time. So yes, also the American citizens, the public, was very angry about the Vietnam War, and they wanted to stop the war already. And the election came, and it was a main point of discussion and very important point of the campaign. So the Republican Richard Nixon won the election in the end, and he said he has a secret plan to end the war. On the 27th October of 1969, Richard Nixon ordered a squadron of 18 B-52s loaded with nuclear weapons to reach the Soviet airspace. This is how he wanted to demonstrate that he is capable of everything to end the Vietnam War. Anti-war movements gained strength in the United States, and Nixon appealed on the silent majority approving the war. He said that many people still approve and sustain the Vietnamese war, but they remain silent. This was absolutely a crazy idea. But after the My Lai massacre was astonishing the public, they were really surprised that American soldiers raped and mutilated Vietnamese girls and women, also underage women, and well, This was absolutely shocking for the international and American media, and many people started to protest against the Vietnam War, and they wanted to end the war. So Nixon gained the senses in the end, and he started to withdraw the troops from Vietnam, and he returned to the old strategy and policy which was actually applied by President Kennedy, that he will just order the training and expansion of South Vietnamese soldiers without American engagement in the battles. Following the Tet Offensive and the decreasing support among the US public for the war, the US forces began a period of moral collapse, disillusionment and disobedience. Many troops were sent to patrol and find the enemies, and they refused to engage in battles, so they didn't want to fight anymore in the Vietnam War. Absolutely incredible, but this was actually the reasonable response of the US soldiers. They just wanted to go home. So instead of search and destroy, the new strategy was search and evade, or search and avoid. So actually, even if some US troops were finding some Viet Cong trails or some Viet Cong bases, they didn't want to report about these, and they just avoided the enemies. And also drug uses were very often among the US soldiers. Most of them were using marijuana, like 30%, and between 10 and 15% they were using also very hard heroin. In 1970, Nixon ordered the withdrawal of further troops. 150,000 American soldiers were going back in that year, so the US army in Vietnam was reduced to 265,500. In next year, in 1971, also New Zealand and Australia withdraw completely their troops, and the American soldiers were also going home. So actually in 1971, 196,700 soldiers remained in Vietnam. On the 15th January of 1973, all US combat activities were suspended by the president because 12 days later, on the 27th January, the Paris Peace Accords were signed between the two enemies. US was represented by Henry Kissinger, the national security advisor of Nixon, and there was also the reluctant President Thieu from the South Vietnam side. And North Vietnam was represented by Le Duc Tho, a general and a diplomat of the North Vietnamese army, and also the Provisional Revolutionary Government of Republic of South Vietnam was presented. So we can imagine this like there was also somebody from the South Vietnamese opposition. So this was Nguyen Thi Binh, who was like a foreign minister. So these four leaders signed finally this ceasefire, and what this pact contained. Actually, the US troops should leave Vietnam in 60 days, and also the pact of the Geneva Conference from 1954 must be valid, so the territorial integrity of Vietnam should be granted, and democratic elections should take place in the north and in the south, as in this pact from Geneva was established. But none of these were accomplished except that the US troops were withdrawn by March of that year. Later that year, Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Kissinger and the North Vietnamese diplomat Le Duc Tho, but Tho refused to get the award because he said true peace doesn't exist yet. On the 15th March of 1973, President Nixon implied that the US would intervene again militarily if the North Vietnamese army would launch an attack to the south. public, and the Senate condemned this statement of the president very soon, and the Senate issued the Case Church amendment to prohibit any intervention. After two clashes that left 55 South Vietnamese soldiers dead, President Thieu announced on the 4th January of 1974 that the war has been restarted and the Paris peace accords are no longer valid. After that, many battles were initiated by the North Vietnamese army, and all of them were won by them. So they kept pushing towards the South Vietnamese capital, Saigon. On the 7th April of 1974, three North Vietnamese divisions attacked Suan Loc, 64 kilometers east of Saigon. The South Vietnamese soldiers and army tried to make a last stand to defend South Vietnam and to withstand against this huge pressure from the North Vietnamese. And after many weeks of bloody battles, however, on the 21st April, they were ordered to withdraw to defend Saigon. An embittered and tearful President Thieu announced that the US government betrayed South Vietnam, and he said that he is resigning from his role as president. After having appealed unsuccessful to the Congress for $722 million in emergency aid for the South Vietnam, the new President Ford announced on a television speech the end of the US aid and the end of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War finally ended on the 13th April of 1975 when North Vietnamese troops entered into the South Vietnamese capital Saigon, and they quickly overcame all the resistance and they captured the main administration buildings, and the two tanks crashed the gates of the Independence Palace, and the Viet Cong flag was raised around 11:30 a.m. That marked the end of the Vietnam War. And in the end, some shocking statistics about the Vietnam War. On the Vietnamese side, the number of the fallen is between 966,000 and 3,010,000, and many of them were civilians. The number of the civilian fallen are between 405,000 and 2 million, and on the US side, 282,000 soldiers were fallen, but some sources claim this number to be 58,220. Many people died, and what the United States done, they invested $168 billion in this war during these years. And if we calculate how much is that money now, it is $1,470 billion. Absolutely incredible. You could not imagine how this money could be invested in a right way. There is famine in the world. Many African countries are suffering, but not just in Africa, all over the world. So this is a very, very big sum, a very big amount of money, and they invested it in a war without any meaning. So yeah, it's absolutely crazy. This time we'll visit a very important location of the Vietnam War, the Cu Chi tunnels. These tunnels are part of a very complex tunnel system which is underlying the whole country. The Viet Cong soldiers used these tunnels and constructed actually these tunnels in order to counterattack the growing American forces, in order to survive and also to fight back. So these tunnels were used as communication purposes, but also for food and weapon caches. And you can imagine that most of the tunnels were not so wide, but there were also some rooms which served as a hospital. So yeah, it was an absolutely amazing and complex structure. The Viet Cong soldiers used these tunnels to get behind the enemy lines, and this is how they could surprised the American forces many times. American soldiers used the term black eco to describe the conditions in the tunnels. It was a very hard life for the Viet Cong inside underground because there was a lack of water, food and air, and the tunnels were also infested by venomous centipedes, ants, rodents, snakes, also scorpions. Yeah, it was very difficult to live there, and usually they came out only during the night in order to engage in a combat. So yeah, it was absolutely hard to survive there, and there were many days when the Americans were bombing the places and where they suspected that there are tunnels, so they were bombing very long. So these soldiers sometimes, these Viet Cong soldiers sometimes remained more than one day inside of the tunnel. So yeah, you can imagine it was absolutely horrible. But some places also had a kitchen inside, and they could I think it was absolutely amazing how they could organize these tunnels, so they could also manage that the smoke was not flying out immediately, so they were not discovered by the enemy. Because of these bad conditions, sickness was rampant between the people living in the tunnels, so malaria was very common. This was the second largest cause of death next to the wounds of the battle. The tunnels also had a defense system. They had explosive booby traps and bungee stick pits. So these bungee sticks were actually made out of wood or bamboo. They were like spikes, so if the enemy fall on these, they had a serious wound, and if they were lucky, then they died suddenly, because stuck in a tunnel like this without a fellow soldier who could help him out, it was horrible, because maybe or very probably starving to death with these wounds and waiting for these rodents and other venomous snakes and scorpions which are living there. So yeah, you can imagine how terrible that was. But of course I'm on the side of the Vietnamese, because I condemn the American invasion, which was absolutely unnecessary, and this is actually already a political discussion, and I will not enter on this. But yeah, let's focus on the historical facts. So what did the Americans try in order to eliminate these tunnels? In the beginning, they tried to flush the tunnels with water or hot tar or tear gas, but these tunnels were so cleverly constructed and designed that they had trapdoors and also air filtration, so the Viet Cong soldiers could escape from these. So you can imagine like entering in a small tunnel, and if you flush some water inside, that this tunnel actually has another way on the left, and the Viet Cong soldier could just turn left, and the water was flowing down straight. So yeah, it was very cleverly designed, like they could always escape from these attempts. So what did the Americans do after? They trained an elite combat, an elite troops called the Red Tunnels, and these people were educated and trained in order to deal only with the tunnels. So they had only one pistol, one knife and strings and a flashlight, so they could just enter inside. But the tunnel system was so complicated, and as I mentioned before, it had also many traps, that it was impossible for the US people to eliminate these tunnels and to fight against the Viet Cong soldiers in this territory. So the existence of the tunnels caused high frustration for the US. By 1965, the Viet Cong soldiers and the locals were in such a strong position because of this very complex tunnel system, that they could decide and they could lead when and where these battles will engage when and where they will start. So yeah, it was a very high frustration for the US soldiers, and well, they trained also dogs in order to spot the Viet Cong people inside the tunnels, but all these strategies proved ineffective against the very clever and smart locals. In 1968 the Tet offensive took place, and the base of operation were the Cu Chi tunnels, which were by that time already 121 kilometers long, 75 miles, so absolutely huge, amazing tunnel system. So currently we can visit these because the Vietnamese government preserved some parts for a war memorial, and also for the tourists to learn about the history of the Vietnam War. So yeah, I'm very excited to go there, so let's get started. But before that, just a very short information. You can book a shared tourist group trip on TripAdvisor. It's just 17 US dollars, not 70, 17. So yeah, it's very cheap, and also if you contact local tour companies, they offer this trip for the same price. So actually here is no difference if you book it online or book it locally, so it's up to you which choice did you want. So yeah, let's get started.
Which is the war with American. During that time we used many traps like this. Okay, so to make it more special, you think that only this bamboo can kill you? No, it cannot kill you. If you're very lucky, when you jump down here, only you get in like over there. Yeah, so only one stick will stick to your leg. So how can you die? So that we want to, no, we want to increase more damage. So how? We
Poison.
throw the shit and pee down there. Yeah, to increase the bacteria. Yeah, so that when the people, they fall down here, what will happen? The bacteria will get inside their blood. And so, if the people come here and rescue them, the teammate rescue them, they need to cut the legs, cut the arms, or any part that have hurt by this one, this bamboo tree.
Maar besef dat het gewoon, hij is veel te lang.
Je ziet echt heel
Ja.
veel. Oh, het ging echt makkelijk.
Ja.
Yeah, make it fit. Okay, well done. Okay, slowly. Okay, well done. Anyone want to? Good. Any more Vietcong? Okay.
The tour guide told that they also used fake channels in order to attract the Americans there, and then they were trapped.
If you can work, if you can run, you can get inside the armor. Okay? And so, you can see our outfit over here. This is the big Kong outfit. Most of the thing is green. Yeah. So why we have to use a green color? Because like I told you, we need to hide under the tree, under the jungle. So that's why with a very like green color like this, you can easy to hide. And what is this blanket used for? It cannot make you warm because this one, yeah, very small. Yeah, it's not fit for this very beautiful girl. So how? What is this one used for? This one, they used to protect most of the soldier from mosquito and insect.
Which way everyone goes.
Right foot here.
You can't.
Keep on, you're gonna get right foot here. Down. And you can bring your left foot down into here.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. Then you can get right foot onto here. And then down from there. Yeah. Chụp lấy luôn đi cho tăng á, đứng trước này. Đứng trước đây nè.
Thank you.
So that on your body, everywhere is the hole. Yeah. Okay? This one, the jaw trunk. It will make a half of your body stuck over here. Yeah. So it will make sure that the enemy, when they fall down here, they cannot alive. Yeah. Okay? This one just look a little bit similar to our chair. So, the samples, they were very rude. Yeah, so I'm going to keep them. We put this one on the ceiling. Yeah, like a souvenir for them. Because the samples, they were very rude. So that this one will fall down when they step out, like when they hit our door by the legs. Yeah, they often hit our door by the legs. So that's why this one on the ceiling, and then it will fall down when you open the door. Okay? And also this one, yeah, the trap I love to talk about. This one there. Okay, so this one, they often put on the ceiling also. And when it's fall down, it will fall like this. Yeah, so why we have to cut over here? So,
Goes in.
okay. Every time when they try to cut it, they need to put water to make sure that it will not too hot and it will not too low. Okay? Okay, let's see over here. We have a lot of grenades. Grenades is normal, but I have a story about landmines for you. Okay? So at that time, when they put the landmine, they need to use the dirt to put on it. But if they put the dirt, the mice flipper. When they put the dirt on it, the mice flipper can fly down. So that's why we don't use any dirt. We use another thing. Can you guess what is that? Another thing to cover, no, not leave. It's too basic. We use the thing and when I come to Vietnam, I have to go first to find the landmark. So when I dig up, I often touch the ship.
I think it's very bizarre that here's a shooting range and you can buy some shooting practices. And sorry that I couldn't add some more commentary to the places which we visit. I hope that these are self-explaining. Oh my god. The reason behind is that we are moving from one place to another very quickly. Our tour guide takes us very quick from one place to another. That's why I couldn't really talk. So yeah, this is the shooting range here. But actually, regarding to the first part of the vlog, this is 100% what I explained at the beginning, the booby traps and everything, so the cages, the traps for the American soldiers. So you can imagine that actually what I was saying in the beginning, it's what I showed after.
Vietnamese, we often buy this one and still here. But you can use for eating also.
I don't know how it's to work here and listen to all this shooting all the day, because there is also a buffet, and yeah, this means that they need to listen it like in a war zone. Absolutely incredible. And here we can also find a traditional Vietnamese house from that period.
Oh, that one's
They made sandals out of the tires of the American cars, which they trapped or destroyed. This is how they could reuse it. It's very strong. So now we finally go inside of one of the tunnels.
okay. If your health is not good and you have problem with heart and lungs, don't come down here. Okay? Okay?
Excuse me. You don't have to leave right. Oh, I don't like it.
Okay, keep moving, please. No photo. Keep moving. Hello. Wow.
My God. Oh my God.
Okay, keep moving, guys. Hurry up.
100 meter long. It's not for claustrophobic people,
Get down, get down.
that's for sure.
Anyone else coming? Two people come from India, they don't go.
Oh my God.
Get stuck.
Split up. Oh my god, this was very tough. These tunnels were really real. I don't know how the Viet Cong survived there many days, but well, I wouldn't survive there an hour. It was very tough to go through this tunnel. So this was my presentation about the Vietnam War. It was very long, but I wanted to explain you step by step what was the process, how did it escalate, and what was the reason, how things happened during the Vietnam War. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and if that's so, please subscribe to my channel if you didn't do it yet. It's very important to push on the bell icon, because this is how you get notified about the new contents. Have a nice day, have a great evening, and goodbye.